This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
This is an extraordinary meeting of the Police and Crime Committee under Section 1.7 of the Authority's Standing Orders. I confirm that this meeting be called as a matter of urgency in order to hold a confirmation hearing for the Mayor's proposed appointee to the Office of Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime at the earliest opportunity in accordance with Section 100B 4B of the Local Government Act of 1972. Can I welcome everyone to the Police and Crime Committee meeting? Our main business today is to hold a confirmation hearing for the proposed appointment of Sophie Linden to the Office of Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime. Please make sure that your electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any unnecessary interruptions this morning. Can I now ask our clerk, Lauren Harvey, if any apologies have been received for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Assembly Member Moema, and Assembly Member Mafuz is attending as a substitute.
Thank you, Lauren. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 3 and ask Assembly members if they have any other disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? Can I invite Sophie Linden to declare any interest relevant to the business of this meeting or in relation to her appointment to the Office of Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime? No. Okay, so this brings us to our main item. Can I welcome Sophie Linden, the Mayor's nominee for the Office of Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, to the meeting? Welcome, Sophie. The committee will be putting questions to Sophie in relation to her proposed appointment. However, can I first ask the committee to, first of all, note the background information circulated within the agenda for the meeting? Yep. Thank you. We will now move on to the question and answer session. So we are going to start with Assembly Member Unmesh Desai.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor, in the first section, the questions are about your personal attributes and capability. And the first question that I'm going to ask you is, what have you personally brought to the role of Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime over the past 8 years?
Thanks a lot. Can I just say, just before I start, congratulations to everyone, and congratulations to those of you who are returning and those of you who are new, and welcome to the Police and Crime Committee. I actually feel a bit nervous, actually. It's really difficult to, well, not difficult, it's quite nerve-wracking to be interviewed in public for a job. So, but obviously I totally understand why that's the case. In terms of my personal attributes for the job and what I've done over, what I've brought to this role over the last 8 years, I like to think what I've brought is my experience that has been garnered over the years of my career, which is experience from national government and local government, very much local government, having been a Hackney councillor for 10 years, and you'll see that from my CV. And that experience, to be able to bring that, meld that together to work across London at a strategic level. And that experience is across the piece, from working in education and health, which I found very helpful in terms of convening partners and convening the really important partners for tackling crime and bringing crime down. But more importantly, really, I think for this role is my experience and my expertise around policing and crime, having started in 2001 in this area as an advisor to a previous Home Secretary and working in the Home Office, but also leading on policing and crime in Hackney as well, setting up the gangs unit, reducing, tackling antisocial behaviour and understanding what it takes to deliver at a local level, but also to convene partners and to work with, right across the piece, work with stakeholders to tackle police, crime, and to work with communities and empower communities, listen to their voices, feedback their voices, and understand what is their experiences.
Okay. Thank you. Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Sophie. Effectively, you would be the continuity candidate, and why should Londoners be happy with the status quo with you continuing? Why do you believe that would be good?
I think continuity is actually incredibly important when you're dealing with policing and crime. And if you look at my CV, you'll see that I'm not somebody who has flitted from job to job. I've spent a long time in the jobs that I've worked in, from 10 years as a Hackney councillor, for many years working in government, the full amount of time I could in the Home Office. Continuity is important, understanding of the challenges is really important, experience is important, but also the ability to think about, and this is what I also bring to the job, I think, the ability to look back and evaluate what has happened. Could you have done it better? What else you could do differently? So there's an issue, yes, it is about continuity, but it's also a continuity to think about how you do things differently. And this is a new term. This is the third term of Sadiq Khan's mayoralty. I think Londoners have been very clear that they wanted not only continuity, but they really wanted what Sadiq stood for and what he was offering Londoners. They've been very clear about that. And Sadiq has also been very clear about this third term being absolutely focused on delivery, and the energy and the commitment to do that I bring to this role.
Okay, but continuity can be a good or a bad thing. In November 2022, Sir Tom Wilson, the former Chief Inspector of Constabulary, suggested that the Met was moved into the engage process, not only because the MPS was failing, but also because MOPAC was failing. So what will you do differently then? Because obviously that's an area where you wouldn't like to see continuity because there was a failure there. So what are you going to do differently to increase the performance of MOPAC?
So Sir Tom Windsor was the Chief Inspector of Constabulary at that time, and yes, the Met was moved into engage. That engage process did not have any evaluation or critique of MOPAC, because the HMIC FRS inspects police forces. It does not inspect MOPAC. So that's, I beg to differ on your the way in which you've posed that question.
Well, he did use the words, not only was MPS failing, but also MOPAC was failing.
Not in the engage process. Sir Tom Windsor was brought in to look at a review of the way in which Cressida Dick stepped down. HMIC FRS have not inspected MOPAC. They have no powers over MOPAC. So, but in terms of your question, which is a very important question about what will be different in terms of engage and in terms of the oversight of the Met, I think is what you're talking about. Baroness Casey's review did talk about some of the lessons to be learnt, and we've discussed this at Police and Crime Committee before, about what should MOPAC be doing differently around oversight. And we have certainly been thinking, we have thought about that. We have brought in more capacity on oversight. We have we have accepted, not only accepted Baroness Casey's recommendation of the London Policing Board, we have set up the London Policing Board, and we are at the beginning of June going into its fourth meeting of the London Policing Board. So there is a new structure and a new process for oversight. And the other thing from Baroness Casey's report is really thinking about the powers and the levers that all the bodies and organisations that look at Metropolitan Police, from HMIC, FRS, IOPC and ourselves in MOPAC and the College of Policing, how do we work together? That is what we are also doing differently.
I'm more concerned about what you will be doing in MOPAC, not what you'll be doing to look at the Met. What will change in MOPAC's performance because you have done something different? That's my point. Because to go slightly deeper, what would be very interesting is, do you have a plan? Do you have a written plan that the staff in MOPAC are following in order to increase their performance? You know, what are you going to do about MOPAC? MOPAC is a body that you run. We know about the MPS. As you've said, we have a lot of conversations about the MPS in Police and Crime. What are you going to do differently? Because this is about your appointment, not anything to do with the police beyond that.
So in terms of what is MOPAC going to do differently and what will I do differently, yes. I think convening the partners, and that's what I am doing, is convening the partners such as HMIC, FRS, IOPC and the College of Policing to work together to ensure that the oversight and the knowledge and the expertise of those partners is brought to bear on the reform of the Met and the improvement around performance. In terms of MOPAC, I will be working, as I have done, with the directors and the board of MOPAC and the chief executive of MOPAC to ensure that performance is good. Now that performance is not just about policing, although policing and oversight is incredibly important role of MOPAC, and that's a statutory responsibility. Of course, the other bits of performance around MOPAC is our commissioning services and ensuring that not only are we commissioning and getting the money out to organisations on time, but also that we get value for money. And that's certainly a role that I take very seriously around performance management of MOPAC to ensure that the services that we commission are effective, are doing what they are set up to do. So, for example, we have the performance framework quarterly performance meetings around performance of MOPAC, and that's something, there is consistency in that, but that is something that I will continue to do.
Okay, and my final question, Chair, is do you agree with the Met Commissioner that the Met needs to increase its stop and search?
I think in terms of stop and search, it is an incredibly valuable tool. I've always held that position. It's a valuable tool that needs to be intelligence-led, carried out in a respectful and polite manner in the way that we've talked about many times at this Police and Crime Committee. The Met Police Commissioner is very clear that it's a valuable tool. Individual officers take the decisions around stop and search. They take those decisions when they're out on the streets, and it is for them to take those decisions as to whether they have the grounds to stop and search. If they do stop and search, we support that. I support that. The Mayor supports that. We support its use. It is a valuable tool, and we've seen that. It does take hundreds of knives off the street, and it can, we've found instances where it's made a real difference. So in terms of stop and search, absolutely support its use.
But do you support an increase in its use? The Mayor has not always been there, and this isn't about the Mayor, this is about you, your position on stop and search. Do you agree with the Commissioner that there should be an increase in the use of stop and search within London?
I support the use of stop and search.
I'm talking directly about an increase.
Yes, well, I cannot, as you know, the use of stop and search is an operational matter. I am concerned in the decrease in stop and search, and I am concerned by what Sir Mark Rowley has talked about openly and publicly on a number of occasions about the confidence of officers to use their powers. So I would want to make sure that officers feel confident that they are able to use their powers, including stop and search on the streets. If that means there is an increase in stop and search because they have taken that judgment at that point, that's for those individual officers to make that decision. So
you don't believe that your stance, the Mayor's stance, MOPAC stance, has any effect on the confidence of the officers to use that power or not?
We have been consistent throughout this mayoralty, absolutely consistent, that we support the use of stop and search in an intelligence-led way that is polite, respectful. That has always been our position. So officers should feel confident in using that power because we support the use of it.
I'm going to stop there because I feel this is turned into a police and crime meeting, and I forget that it's a confirmation hearing. Excuse me, Sophie, that's normally how we follow, but it should be clear the Mayor has been very, very loud about his wanting stop and search to be reduced.
That's not the case.
It is. He actually ran his first campaign.
Lord Bailey, you know that's not the case. He has been very clear of his support of stop and search.
Absolutely the case. Chair, back to you.
Thank you. Just to confirm then, you would approve if stop and search increased?
If there are the grounds for police officers to use stop and search, of course, it is an individual operational decision of police officers whether they use stop and search. It isn't for politicians like me or appointed people like me to decide whether an individual police officer at that moment should use stop and search. I have looked at the figures for stop and search. I've listened to the Commissioner around his concerns around the confidence of officers to use their police powers. I'm sitting here saying it is a valuable tool. If there are the grounds to do it, police officers should feel confident to do so, because it can take knives off the streets and it can make things safer.
Yeah, I know. I think many of us here agree with that. You say it's not a political decision. Of course, the Mayor ran originally on reducing it. So if it's not a political decision, I don't know what those comments were.
You know that's not the case.
But I'm going back to you, because we are interviewing you, and you are saying that you are supportive of it, which I'm sure many of us here are pleased to hear. Assembly Member Garrett. Garbett, sorry.
No, that's fine, don't worry. Hi, Sophie. Just following on from that, the theme of the previous question, I'm going to change my question slightly just to include, I didn't hear any discussion about kind of disproportionality and how stop and search impacts our community. So my question is around reflecting on your successes, but what you think London's diverse communities would say your successes have been. But yeah, with the frame of leading off the last question. Thank you.
No, I mean, I didn't talk about disproportionality and stop and search just, a few moments ago, but it's certainly been an absolute focus of the work of MOPAC and the work of myself. And many people around the table know of the work that we've been doing. After the terrible murder of George Floyd, we developed the Mayor's action plan around trust and confidence in police, and that really was looking at the disproportionality. We have set up a disproportionality board to make sure there's openness, transparency, and accountability, not just about policing, but actually across the criminal justice system around disproportionality. So for youth service as well, for youth justice as well. It's a difficult question to answer. What would London's communities think about the successes of MOPAC? Have they seen a difference in the use of stop and search? I think that will not have had I think if you asked London's diverse communities, they are still concerned about some of the disproportionate use of police powers, including stop and search. We have still got work to do to give them confidence that the use of police powers is proportionate and is equal and fair.
Thank you. Just picking up on some of those themes, and I think you were talking about Casey a moment ago. Last week, Chris Philip, the Minister for Crime and Policing and Fire, said that Casey had largely been done and largely been implemented. And I just wondered what you thought of that, and are there any recommendations within Casey that you're particularly still concerned about the delivery of?
So I don't think it is not possible to deliver all the recommendations and have the impact for the recommendations that the recommendations are intended to have in less than a year and a bit, because the Metropolitan Police is a very large organisation. We all know that the issues and problems that Baroness Casey highlighted and evidence within the Metropolitan Police were incredibly, deep-rooted. So it's not a job of work done. There has been very, very good progress. I think the new Sir Mark Rowley, as Met Commissioner, has been very clear about the standards that police officers need to adhere to. You can see that in the misconduct cases that are coming through, and the increase in the misconduct cases that are coming through. So there has been a lot of progress. There's also been progress in terms of ensuring that, one of the things from Engage, and also that Louise Casey has talked about within her report, was that that sort of that frontline policing had been sort of poor relation of within the Metropolitan Police. So Mark Rowley has been reversing that. You can see that in making sure that the proactive crime fighting units are now at BCU level, not in some of the centrally held crime-fighting units are no longer centrally held at BCU level. That's a real shift, and that's a significant shift. What am I most concerned about? I'm most concerned about, I think, where we need to see more progress is on culture change and performance. That is, it's not that there isn't work underway, but that takes time, and that's very much a real challenge for the Metropolitan Police, and that's where we're certainly making sure that our oversight is there, but also where we can challenge and add value from MOPAC.
Just on that last point, is there anything you do differently if selected for this role? Is there anything you do differently to secure that more oversight? Is there anything that you've got planned?
So part of what we are doing, and I talked about it previously, is off the back of Baroness Casey's review, we've set up the London Policing Board, and that is a very different way of the way in which we now carry out our duties around oversight. It's a public board, it's business is done in public for the transparency and accountability that brings, and I think that is incredibly important, and that's why Baroness Casey recommended it. Now, it was set up post-election in the last administration, but I think in terms of its impact, it's going to, that's going to really gather pace. So there's a little bit of continuity there, but it is incredibly it is a different way in which we are carrying out our oversight.
And sorry, final one from me quickly. And are there going to be more spaces for the communities to also hold MOPAC and the Metropolitan Police to account directly?
One of the things that we've been working on is making sure that is a real challenge, to make sure that we hear the voices of Londoners really loud and clear of all communities in London. And that is a challenge because of the complexity of London. But we have been, one of the things you've seen that we've been working on and we want to implement in this administration is a different structure, a different process of making sure that local communities are able to hold their local police to account on stop and search, but wider police powers as well. And two, that is it's more robust, it's more diverse, and it's more challenging of the Metropolitan Police, so that communities can feel and see that that their voices are being heard and that they can see that action is being taken.
Thank you. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you. Good morning. What have you done as Deputy Mayor to make Londoners and London a safer place?
I think in this role as Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, you have limited levers. And what you can do is, I look at MOPAC and my role as being sort of set out in a few areas. One is around oversight. I think that in terms of the oversight that we've put in around the Metropolitan Police, and we are improving and making more robust. That's a big. My role as head of MOPAC is making sure that I carry out those responsibilities around statutory oversight, and that it drives change and drives reform. So, for example, if you look at the progress that METCC has undertaken recently, where they are now answering over 90% of their calls within target, that is a combination of the oversight and scrutiny, and also the other thing that we can do from MOPAC and from City Hall is investment, and it's a combination of oversight, scrutiny and investment. £2.5 million of mayoral money has gone into METCC in order to be able to work with the Metropolitan Police to turn it around. The other big area that I have as Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, and MOPAC has, is the convening power. We don't have power over other criminal justice services, criminal justice organisations such as the CPS or probation, but we do have the convening power. So I decided sort of mid-term last term to take over the chair of the London Criminal Justice Board in order to be able to drive change, to make sure that we're really looking at how does the criminal justice system come together to tackle the challenges that it's had. I'll give you an example that during COVID, there was, people within the criminal justice system and the victim services talked to me about the impact that COVID was going to have on victims and what could we do. So we convened the criminal justice system together to make sure that we could identify high-risk victims and make sure that they were getting the support that they needed because of the delays in the court system. Now that is an incredibly important role that MOPAC has. And the other role that we have is obviously, and we've just talked a bit in response to the previous question, is how do we ensure that, and it's a responsibility and a duty of MOPAC and myself, that the voices of London's communities are heard. What what they are most concerned about. So, for example, the Public Attitude Survey, which is a nation-leading public attitude survey, we understand what Londoners are most concerned about, we understand their views of the Metropolitan Police, and we understand what they are looking for, and that is what we do from MOPAC and what I ensure happens.
Thank you. However, you'd agree, would you not, that public attitudes towards crime, particularly in London, people don't feel it's safe. People don't, well, they do not feel safer. There are areas which are safe, undoubtedly, but they don't feel safer. And 8 years of you being the Police and Crime Commissioner for London, effectively, what would you consider that to be a failure of MOPAC as much as it is the Met? And what amount of responsibility do you personally take for this problem?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? One of the, looking back over the last 8 years, one of the huge challenges that we've had as a mayoralty, as MOPAC and the Metropolitan Police and the Criminal Justice Service, it's been a massive challenge, and it's not just about the Met and it's not just about London. There has been an increase in demand of policing services. You know, we've seen the complexity of the demand around policing rise, and yes, we have also seen the trust and confidence in policing in the Metropolitan Police really decline. But it's declined across the country, and actually if you look at the figures that the Public Attitude Survey and the ONS now have, that has stabilised, and actually if you look at the figures for trust and confidence in the Metropolitan Police compared to its most similar forces like Greater Manchester or West Midlands, we're above. The Metropolitan Police is above. London's confidence in the Metropolitan Police is higher compared to most similar forces than it is for it is higher.
That's measuring against a low base.
Well, my point is that you asked me what responsibility do I take. My point is that what
I'm
we
still
have
waiting
been,
for the answer to that particular question.
Yeah, fair enough. My point is that if you look at the challenges that myself I have faced during the 8 years that I've been in this office, and City Hall has faced, and the Metropolitan Police have faced, these are challenges that are national. The responsibility and the way in which I have sought to tackle those challenges, I think I would stand by my record of what I have put in terms of the oversight. I would stand by my record of being very clear about what the issues are in the Metropolitan Police, and actually being very clear and taking leadership with the Mayor in leading reform of the Metropolitan Police, making sure that Baroness Casey came in to review the Metropolitan Police so that we could really understand and see and get her recommendations as an expert as to how to change the Metropolitan Police. So I stand by that record in terms of understanding, leading the way. But yes, there have been real challenges, but I'd say those challenges are national. And one of the huge challenges that we've had to battle against is austerity. You cannot, 8 years of austerity have meant that the criminal justice system and policing has had significant pressure, significant cuts, £1 billion out of the Metropolitan Police. They have consequences, and I think that's what we have been trying to, we have been struggling to meet.
Okay. Just turning specifically, you mentioned your record, and in your CV you highlight the importance of tackling sexual offences. And I'm just noting from my notes here that the percentage of sexual offences resulting in sanction has halved from an already low 18% to just 9%. Do you think that this hasn't been given the strategic focus that it should have been given over the last 8 years?
The percentage of detections of serious sexual assault and rape is, it is really, and I've said this many times at this committee, it is not something that is acceptable. It is a real worry and it is a real concern, and it's something that MOPAC and myself have really focused on over the last few years. And I would also say that it's not just the Metropolitan Police that is struggling with this. That is a national challenge. But in terms of what MOPAC has done in terms of strategic focus, from 2019 was the rape review that the Independent Victims Commissioner published with the research and the analysis by MOPAC Evidence and Insight team. Very clear recommendations as to what should happen. MOPAC led the way in developing what was first of all called Operation Bluestone, which was about how should policing, Metropolitan Police, how should they investigate rape and serious sexual offences. That turned into Operation Soteria, which is now a national programme. So I think we have had a clear focus, we have had clear strategic objectives, and we have not only started to shift the detection rates in the Met because there's that focus, it has increased. It's got a long way to go. I'm not, in any way saying it's good enough, but it has started to increase. And we have also been part of the national, not even just part of, we helped develop the national programme, which is making a difference to the way in which police investigates rape.
Yeah. Just before I move on to the next question, possibly the last one with the chair's forbearance, I appreciate that there are problems around the rest of the country, but we are not here to discuss what is happening around the rest of the country. We're here to look at London, and if we could confine our remarks to London issues, that will be helpful for the committee, I'm sure. The Mayor has set a target of allocating 565 more officers to tackle serious sexual offences. Only 156 have been put in place so far. How regularly are you meeting to ensure that these targets are being met, and when do you expect the full cohort to be recruited? That
target is that is a commitment from the New Met for London. In terms of how regularly I am meeting, it is also I meet the Metropolitan Police and the senior leadership on a regular basis. It is part of our oversight on a regular basis, and it's part of the reporting into the London Policing Board and its performance committee. It's been part of the questioning around that. It's been part of the regular reporting from the Commissioner as well. There are regular reports that come up around that. I'd have to get back to you as to when that target is going to be met, because I'm sure we'll come on to this. As you know, there is a recruitment, there is our issues around recruitment at the moment. So the movement of officers is, it is happening. It's happening as fast as the Metropolitan Police can do so, but there are issues around recruitment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions for you, Sophie. In the last meeting, I actually said to you, I said, Sophie, in 2016, you said you would work with the police to rebuild the trust of Londoners. Confidence in the police at that point was 69% when you took over. It is now a miserable 56%, and so clearly something's gone wrong. And then I said, do you accept that it's a poor figure now, which of course was then at 56%. You said it's a worrying figure. Of course it is, and I accept it was a worrying figure before the election. That is why we put the action plan in place. I absolutely accept there needs to be more improvement and progress, and that is what I'm committed to delivering with the MPS. Now, that was at your last hearing. Figures today, I think, show that we're down to something like 47%, which is even worse. So Assemblymember Roberts touched on this. It is much worse. And whatever it was that you were doing, you've gone down from 69%. If you had a plan to make it better last time, I mean, one of the things you said last time that didn't help was we'd gone below 30,000 officers. We're now up to, I believe, about 34,000, 34,500. So we've got lots more officers, and yet trust and confidence is plummeting. So what are you going to tell us this time that you're going to do?
Trust and confidence, I mean, you're absolutely right in terms of the figures, but in terms of your analysis of it, trust and confidence has actually confidence has stabilised in the Metropolitan Police. And as I talked about, and I know you don't like me saying this, but I think it is important that in terms of the national average, it's above the national average, and I think that is important to recognise that, whilst also recognising that trust and confidence is not at a good, an acceptable level at the moment, but it has stabilised. In terms of what we are going to do, and what I'm going to do, is to hold the Metropolitan Police to account in terms of the oversight through the London Policing Board around the New Met for London, which is one of the major pillars around that is neighbourhood policing, and ensuring that neighbourhood policing is delivered into communities communities in a way that improves the trust and confidence, as well as improves the performance of the Metropolitan Police, because those two things are connected. I've already talked about METCC because we know from a lot of research, but also from Evidence and Insight Team's research, that the main drivers around trust and confidence are about: are the police there when you need them, when you call them? Do they detect make a detection, and how you are treated? All those three areas are significant areas of work that we are undertaking in MOPAC. I've talked about METCC, and that's an incredibly important part of ensuring that in emergency response and the fundamental, contract between Londoners and the police, then emergency response is improving, and that is through investment as well. We will continue, and I will continue to ensure that we do everything we can to support the Met, but also to hold them to account for their performance around their engagement with communities, the way in which they treat communities, and the way in which they use their powers. That will continue.
Yeah, but when you started the job, it was at 69%. You said it was unacceptable, and you got a plan in place when it was 56%. It's now 47%. You're saying it's stabilising. Well, it's plummeted, hasn't it, since you've been overseeing this?
I'm not denying it has decreased, absolutely. The figures speak for themselves. What I'm saying is, if you look over the last few quarters, it has stabilised. And in terms of what we can do about that, and in terms of understanding what has happened over the last 3 years, if it's since the last confirmation hearing, because that was 2021, wasn't it? There has been significant interventions and significant work that we've done through MOPAC and through the Mayor. For example, we have a whole new leadership of the Metropolitan Police. We have a significant strategic plan from the new Commissioner, the new Met for London, which absolutely puts trust and confidence at the heart of what the Metropolitan Police is going to be, at the heart of the work of the Metropolitan Police. He's been very clear about the importance of trust and confidence and the importance of working with communities, and that's what we're very clear about. In terms of what can MOPAC do to challenge and to support the Metropolitan Police, we will be implementing that new process by which there is local community scrutiny of local policing, and also ensuring that it is more robust and more diverse.
Yeah, I hear what you say, but nevertheless those figures have plummeted. The Casey review found that MOPAC, and I'm quoting, have not been able to provide a strategic oversight function that the Met needs, and there is a dysfunctional relationship between the Met and MOPAC. So do you think that's right?
Yes, I mean, I accepted I accepted the report from Baroness Casey. I think that was right at the time in which she was writing it, and it's something we've taken very, very seriously in terms of learning the lessons. What did that mean about lack of strategic oversight, and the way in which the relationship needed to be improved? And that's what I have been doing since the recommendations and the report was published, is working and making sure that MOPAC works as well to improve the way in which we work together, to improve the trust, to improve the accountability, and to improve that relationship.
Do you not think that since you're in charge of MOPAC that it's a great pity that you hadn't noticed it without somebody else coming in from outside actually pointing out that there's a dysfunctional relationship? Do you not regret that you did not notice that as you are in charge?
I think you mistake what I've just said about accepting what was in the recommendations and accepting the evidence of the report. Is not the same as saying, that was a huge surprise to me. Of course I knew what was going on, and one of the reasons that we asked for Baroness Casey to come and do the review was to make sure that we had all the evidence around it. And of course she interviewed me, and of course I told her what my view was of the relationship. And part of that review of the relationship has been a new leadership of the Metropolitan Police, a new way of working with the Metropolitan Police, and new oversight, much more open, much more transparent and accountable to Londoners.
Which means then that all the figures should be going in the right direction.
I would hope that over the course of the next 4 years, the figures will go, and of course I want that to happen, and we will do our utmost to make sure that happens, including in investing in making sure that the Metropolitan Police has as far as we can, has the resources it needs, and the officers and the staff that it needs. But we have to be really clear about the context that we are working in. We have got a position where the Metropolitan Police is not funded to the extent that it needs to be funded. the Commissioner was very clear about what he needed in terms of staffing, but has not been successful with the Home Office in terms of getting that funding into the Metropolitan Police. But we are going to be working with him to try to free up officers that are doing staffing roles so that they can go back onto the front line.
Okay, but you accept you've had to give £90 million back to the government.
I think it was £64 million that the government clawed back from the police uplift programme.
Which was money that was given to you for extra police officers.
It was given for
from
extra
the government.
Police. It was given for extra police officers, but the Commissioner's been very clear that if he were able to have not have had that money clawed back from the budget, he would have used it to employ staff to free up officers who are doing roles that officers should not be doing that staff could do. So you would have the capacity going back onto the front line, officers going back onto the front line, and onto tackling crime.
Yes, and I'm sure we'll come on to what on earth you were doing if you couldn't actually recruit. When you were last
I'm happy
reappointed
to answer that now
to this,
if you want, because
I'm sure we'll come to that. When you were last reappointed to this role, you said your absolute number one challenge is tackling violence. Since then, violent crime has increased. Would it be reasonable, therefore, to suggest that you've not been able to meet that challenge?
So we know, if you look at the figures, that since 2016, homicides are down by 3%. The number of young people injured by knives has gone down by 19%. Gun crime has gone down 19%. So yes, we still have. I mean, we are not at the levels we would want to be. We still have work to do. But in terms of tackling violence, I think our record stands on the statistics and that I've just given you. But also, we've been very clear about not only that this is a priority, but we've been very clear in what we are doing about it. We set up London's first violence reduction unit, up and running by 2019. It is having an impact. It is, providing positive opportunities for thousands of positive opportunities for young people. And not only was it London's first violence reduction unit, but it led again, work that we have done from MOPAC and the Mayoralty, leading the way nationally. There is now a network of violence reduction units because we set up the violence reduction unit. We changed the way in which the government, we changed the government's mind on this, and they started to invest in violence reduction units across the country.
Yeah, I hear what you say, but knife crime is at its highest level ever. I think robbery is up 21% from the person. Theft from a person is up 25.5%. Do you actually believe that London is safer now than when you first started this role?
Look, there is work to be done in making London safer. I think that London is actually, if you look at the statistics, and apologies again about going national, if you look at the statistics, on many counts, London is safer than the rest of the country. You are less likely to be a victim of violent crime in London than you are in other parts of the country.
Knife crime figures are going up over the country because London is bringing those figures, affecting those figures so badly, and the stats are out there. Last time you were reappointed to this role, you told us that there were not any decisions you regretted making. Is that still the case in 8 years of holding this role?
I think it's always a difficult one, isn't it? I've been doing this role for 8 years, and of course I've thought about what could we have done differently, and I've also made sure that MOPAC, not only do I think about what could we have done differently, but what does the evidence show us that we should have done differently? And that's part of the Evidence and Insight team's evaluation of our commissioning programmes. So we have changed the way, and it's not that I think we did it wrong in the first place. I just think there are lessons that can be learnt. So, for example, I was really, and I still am, really, really proud of the work that we did to make sure that we could work with and support the victims of county lines. And we set up the Rescue and Response Service, but we also had the London Gang Exit, and we also had other services. And we have changed the way in which we are commissioning. So yes, it's not saying we did it wrong, but we've learnt some lessons. We've made sure that the new way in which commissioning the services, which is just getting up and running now, is slightly different, and I think that's really important that we learn the lessons. We've learned those lessons through victim services as well. The new London Victims and Witness Service, the way in which we procured it and put it out to tender, we looked at what we could have done differently and how we could have provided better services. It's not saying that we were, everything was wrong, but it's always important to learn lessons.
It's also always important to accept when all the figures or most of the figures are going in the wrong direction, to at least accept some responsibility for that. I've seen Assembly Member Best.
Thanks. Sophie, I just wanted to come back to the point about the money that you had to pass back to government, upwards of £64 million for recruitment. And I know you've been told not to make national comparisons, but you've clearly done your homework. So to give you the opportunity to do that, how many other constabularies in the UK had to pass money back to the government because they didn't make the recruitment targets?
I'll answer the question that you know the answer to. The Metropolitan Police is the only one. But we must, in terms of why that is the case, the labour market in London is incredibly challenging for the whole of the public sector. If you look at the figures for vacancies in teaching, in nursing, in probation, 18 of the 24 probation units in London are flashing red in terms of recruitment, in terms of numbers of probation officers. London is a very challenging labour market. So there is a real, it is very, very challenging. The Met is doing all it can to recruit up to target. It hasn't managed to. We know
I
that.
think, excuse the pun, but most people would say that's a cop-out. But thank you.
Assembly Member Ahmed.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Sophie. First of all, I'd like you to stop apologising for talking about national issues. London does not exist in a vacuum, and we do have to look at national figures as well. And you mentioned austerity, of course. I think everyone around this table knows that austerity has had a massive impact, not just on the police, but any public service in this country. And of course, there are two parties, coalition-wise, that have been responsible for that around this table. So thank you for letting us and making sure that we remember that. And thank you also for mentioning the two excellent initiatives of Operation Bluestone and Operation Satira, which I think, and having read a lot about them, these are issues that we should be shouting about, because they are now national initiatives, and it's something that we should be very proud of. And with all of that in mind, could you talk about what you think will be the biggest opportunities in the role as Deputy Mayor in the next term?
I think there's a number of opportunities in this role, and the greatest opportunity genuinely is working with the Metropolitan Police, it's working with our partners across the criminal justice system, and working with our communities, because all three of those sort of areas have the most amazing committed professionals, committed to change, committed to improvement, committed to reform, and our communities have the lived experience, the talent and the skills to work with us and work with the Metropolitan Police and work with the criminal justice system to actually make some great strides and improve the service that they are getting. And I think that's a massive opportunity. London is, it's one of the best it is the best place in the world, and that is an opportunity. Working in London on policing and crime is the opportunity it gives you, are the people that you work with. It's complex, it's challenging, but that's the opportunity.
Thank you. And going back to the money that was clawed back by the government for recruitment, can you tell us what you did to make representations to ask for that money not to be clawed back?
So we've lobbied very hard, as has the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, to try to make sure that the government did not claw that money back. The Commissioner, we supported a bid that was put into the Home Office to say, if you don't take that money back, we can spend it on staff, and those staff will make sure that we no longer have to put police officers in backroom roles, in roles that staff can do, but they can go and out and use the powers, their warranted powers, to tackle crime on the streets of London.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I've got three people wanting to come in. First of all, Assembly Member Duval.
Thank you very much. Can I just go back to the barriers of recruitment? And one of those issues over the last 13 years has been about the government's attitude about pay. So the question is, what have we been doing, or you been doing, over the last 8 years about trying to get a sensible pay arrangement to make it attractive for new entrants into the Metropolitan Police Authority? Just before I get accused of being a cop-out for that question.
I think being clear about the position in which the Met is working is absolutely essential. It's about real and pragmatic leadership, isn't it, rather than just saying, oh, well, it all doesn't matter. Pay, and the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police has been very clear about this. The Federation of the Metropolitan Police have been very clear about this as well, nationally as well, actually. The National Federation have as well, that pay is one of the number one issues for police officers. If you want to be able to recruit into the roles of police officers, you need to pay. You need to be able to pay them well. Why is that different in London? We all know why that's different in London, because of the cost of living in London is significantly higher than it is in the rest of the country. What I have been doing about that, and what the Mayor has been doing about that, is one, lobbying government to make sure that the pay is commensurate to the work that the police officers are doing, and also ensures that they can actually afford to live and to work in London. The Commissioner, we supported the Commissioner in last administration when he uplifted the London Waiting, the allowance that London Waiting gets. He put it right to the top of the scale, and I have recently been giving evidence to the pay review body to make the case and support the Metropolitan Police's case for significant increase in pay rise for officers, because they are very clear that you have to be able to recruit within London, and in order to do that you have to pay the wages that would mean that officers can live and work in London, and at the moment that's not the case.
Right, thank you. Can we just turn now to priorities within the Mayor's policing and crime plan? So over the last administration, what's worked well? What were the sticking points? What are the lessons to be learned for the future?
I think we've probably covered quite a few of the issues. The Mayor's Police and Crime Plan, and the Police and Crime Plan is very clear about the priorities around tackling violence against women and girls, trust and confidence, and protecting people from harm and exploitation. Trust and confidence, we've been round, there have been some real barriers around that. Violence, I think, the lessons around violence are really about making sure you keep that focus, which we have tried to do, but also making sure that you convene. Now, I do think, convene the partners to really look at long-term prevention, and that has been about the Violence Reduction Unit. I think the lessons are that long-term prevention needs to be, and that public health approach needs to be applied to all areas, and that's why the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy that we published a couple of years ago was very clear about the public health approach. But I think one of the lessons around, the police are very keen on the 4 Ps. We've, in terms of pursuit and perpetrate, I think the policing is stepping up to that, but we need to be much clearer and have a clearer plan around where that prevention comes in, but also where the protection comes in. So that's very clear. I'm clear in my mind about some of the lessons that have been learnt. I think it has been very, very difficult and challenging to work, not because partners, and I genuinely mean this isn't a criticism of partners, it is very challenging to work with partners when they themselves are challenged by their finances. They have really, again, I've already talked about probation. Probation is so important for keeping Londoners safe. The way in which probation officers can supervise and really understand risk and then be able to take action against risky individuals, that is really compromised by the fact that probation has been reorganised, restructured and brought back together. It is compromised also by the funding of probation, and it's also been compromised by the fact that it is very, very difficult to recruit. Now, boroughs are also incredibly important partners around community safety. We know that many boroughs are absolutely struggling with their finances, so that they are having to only provide, really, really difficult decisions that they take around the statutory services that they have to provide and what else they can do. That really impacts community safety, and that impacts the safety of Londoners.
And just my final question, to make sense of the crazy world we live in, so a real issue, a topical issue in terms of Emerge for today, Conservative government telling chief constables not to arrest people because of cell space they need to protect for another failure in the prison service because they haven't provided capacity over the 13 years they've been in office. How and what discussions are you having in terms of with the Metropolitan Police around trying to make sense of this issue for Londoners and protecting Londoners maybe from people that have committed crimes who do need to be locked up in police cells?
It is, I mean, looking, well, ask what we're going to do differently. What is different now is that the crisis in the prison service is going to impact London and Londoners. Early release, what's called Operation Early Dawn, is, it's extraordinary that we have got prisoners coming out, we have got courts being asked not to sit, and now it looks like we're getting police officers being asked not to arrest. And then we're getting pressure on how's your detection rates doing? What are we going to do about detection rates? It is extraordinary. It is a real crisis. I'm really concerned what that means around increases in crime. If you're not getting, if people are being released or not actually going on, individuals who should have been on remand will not be kept on remand. Individuals who should still be in prison will be released. That will, I am really worried that will have an impact on levels of crime. What am I doing about that? I have called an extraordinary meeting of the London Criminal Justice Board. That's taking place this afternoon to understand what is going on in London, what the impact is on the Met, what the impact is on probation, and what the impact is on the courts. I had my, and I have spoken to the prison service last week about that in preparation for this meeting. It's very clear that this is a real crisis point. There are no easy solutions, but I have called an extraordinary meeting of the London Criminal Justice Board in order to be able to really understand this and to see what we might be able to do. However, the levers aren't in our hands. These are national services, and we've really got to be very clear. And I would really, really ask for your support from the Police and Crime Committee, being very clear to government about the impact that that's going to have on London.
Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Just to be clear, I share your concern about those issues, and I'm sure in the Police and Crime Committee we will pick them up. But just to go back to a conversation we had earlier on about disproportionality, I want to be very clear about what I'm speaking about here. What is MOPAC doing, not the police? We've spoken at length about what the police are doing. What are MOPAC doing to solve the biggest disproportionality problem for the black community, which is the number of our young men who die to knife crime? So people talk about stop and search, and that's how they imagine disproportionality. If you're actually from the black community, it manifests itself as our young people dying and a huge level of fear that generates in our community. What are MOPAC doing to help alleviate that very serious problem?
Well, what MOPAC has done is set up the Violence Reduction Unit, and you are right, there is that disproportionality there, and we have been very clear about the disproportionality within victims of crime, not just not just in homicide, but also in violence against women and girls. There's disproportionality in that. We have been absolutely clear about that, and we have set up the Violence Reduction Unit, which will continue to do its work in offering positive opportunities and early prevention, and also within City Hall there are a number, and I know you asked about MOPAC, but it's just in terms of this particular issue.
City Hall qualifies as MOPAC. You can get.
Well, it's not quite, but
well, for me, it's enough. It's not.
Okay.
It's not the MPS, okay. So it will
Fair
qualify
enough.
as MOPAC.
There are a number of number of programmes around trying to ensure that young black men are able to take advantage of the training opportunities and the jobs that are available. There are a number of programmes around that. So my answer to your question is the Violence Reduction Unit has been very clear that what their focus is on prevention, and prevention around those areas and those communities that are most affected. We know, and we've had this conversation before, that if you look at the disproportionality, yes, young black men are very often victims, but if you look behind what's behind those, behind it, we know what's driving that. It's lack of educational opportunity, socio and economic factors, and the poorest communities are most affected by violence.
I'm going to disagree with you there, because there's many other communities in London that equally as poor as the black community and have nothing like this level of murder to them. But the point I want to ask is, I spoke to a young woman I know whose brother had been murdered 3 years ago, and she wanted to know what she understood the violence reduction unit, but she said what are they doing about is supporting enforcement and supporting the messaging that this kind of crime is particularly wrong.
So the Violence Reduction Unit is a partnership between the Metropolitan Police, health, education, mental health services, boroughs and housing associations. It's not that you have only prevention. Of course, part of the work is enforcement, and part of that partnership is, is about the partnership with the Metropolitan Police, and they do work with the Metropolitan Police around those areas where violence is, in London where there is most violence. So that, the My Ends community projects, the police are very, if you take Croydon and places like that, the police are very much part of those My Ends community projects because it has to be a partnership. You can't just have one part of the system focusing and bearing down on violence.
Okay, and just to completely change my focus here, different subject. You talked about recruitment challenges that the police have faced and austerity and all the rest of that, but isn't that just hiding behind the fact that there was no proper recruitment plan? Because the police's recruitment problems, you talked about they wanted to take officers who were sat behind desks and put them onto the front line, we'd all agree. But why did that situation arrive? Why wasn't there any plan to deal with that?
So there is on recruitment, there are very clear plans around campaigns, attraction. We have, from MOPAC and the Mayor, have invested in outreach programmes to make sure that all communities understand and are able to take advantage of the fact that the Metropolitan Police is recruiting. So there is no lack of plan. There is a plan.
No, sorry. You misunderstood. You have been the Police and Crime Commissioner for 8 years. This problem didn't manifest now. It manifested over a number of years. Why wasn't MOPAC asking the police to solve that problem all along? Why did it take the
Which problem are you talking about? Sorry?
The balance of staff. Oh. The balance of staff and the recruitment problem, because the recruitment problem is long-standing.
Okay, so if you look at the figures for staffing in the Metropolitan Police, they plummeted, to use your phrase, Susan, they plummeted from 2010 to about 2016, 2017. I haven't got the figures in front of me, because staffing was not given the funding. Successive, the government was not giving funding to staffing. The previous mayor, not Sadiq, cut staffing levels.
But so did Sadiq.
That started to reverse in, is it 2018? I can get you the figures. Started to reverse in 2018, that you can see a slow improvement in the number of staffing. The problem is around staffing is not having a plan, it's about the funding. If you're funding, the funding for the Metropolitan Police Uplift Programme is you can only use that money for police officers, so you cannot use it for staff.
I disagree. No, let's be clear. A plan is, the money is important, you need the money, but it also needs to be a plan, because one of the very first things Sadiq did as mayor was remove £38 million from the police staffing budget. So these problems have been long-standing. If you don't plan for them, then they become worse.
So you know that Sadiq has invested record amounts in the Metropolitan Police. You know that, Sean, and that's been, it's doubled the amount that's been invested into the Metropolitan Police compared to the last mayoralty.
What I said to you is a fact. I'm asking you about a plan. MOPAC's job is to help the police perform.
So there is a plan,
and that's part of the plan. Why did we have to wait till now? That's all I'm asking.
You're not waiting till now. If you look at the figures for staffing, they have slowly started to increase. You can have whatever plan you want. If you do not have the funding, or worse, the funding that you have is absolutely constricted. You can only recruit police officers. You cannot recruit staff. Where the mayor has been able to, there has been increases in staff. So, for example, there have been increases in METCC staffing through direct mayoral investment. There's been increases in staffing in that. But overall, the Metropolitan Police's budget is constricted. Baroness Casey was very clear about that one of the problems for the Met was that that constriction and restriction of funding means that the Met is, the shape of the Met is out of shape. The Commissioner's been very clear about that. It's not lack of understanding of what is needed. You cannot recruit more staff. The clawback of the money for police officers, the Commissioner has directly asked the government, let us use that for staff, and has not been allowed to.
Okay,
Right.
one more.
Well,
Completely
no,
different.
you can come in at the end
I'll come in at
because
the end.
I've got other people waiting. Can I remind everybody this is a job interview?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Assembly Member Bassam Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Sophie. So the Chair has said today when figures are going in the wrong direction, you should accept responsibility for them. One of the other figures we've heard today is about the £1 billion worth of cuts to the Met. So I just want to start by asking how you feel that cuts of 14 years of austerity have impacted on policing in London.
That's not a job interview.
What she's going to do about it. It's a job interview. Yeah.
I think it's very clear how the cuts have impacted the Metropolitan Police. They, in terms of you cannot run a complex and large organisation like the Metropolitan Police when you've got funding restricted, but cuts to funding, and that is one of the reasons why. Not one of the reasons. It was the reason that police officers fell to below 30,000. Now, yes, they are now at 34,000, not to target, but they are now at 34,000. But demand has increased, the population of London has increased, the complexity of crime has increased, and there is a huge gap between what is needed and what can be delivered because of those cuts to funding. But it's also the cuts to funding, as I've talked about previously, around the partners that we rely on, and we rely on for those preventative measures, for the protective measures like mental health services, for the youth services that have been cut. It's also those that have had a huge impact on safety and the Met.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So to follow up on that, I wanted to ask you how you'll be looking to change that if there is a change of government in the next 6 months or so, in order to, going back to some of the points that we've raised around restoring confidence and trust in the police, and doing so by looking to re-establish fully resourced safer neighbourhood teams.
I should have said in one of the opportunities, really, but the question about opportunities, I think one of the big opportunities that we can see coming, it's not a foregone conclusion, not to be complacent about it, but a huge opportunity is the change in government, because we will be working with a government that understands what is needed around crime and safety and policing, and not trying to engage with a government who is actively against what we are trying to do in London and puts up barriers and does not do the things that are needed to be done in order to ensure that policing and all the services that are needed for policing have the right foundations and the funding that they need. So I think that is going to be an opportunity for London, that we will be able to work with a Labour government, and part of the manifesto that Sadiq has just been elected on is that Labour government will deliver, working with us and working with the new government, 1,300 additional officers. That's a significant uplift and additionality for London, which will be important.
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do now is go back to our pre-arranged list. So it's going to be Assembly Member Best, then Assembly Member Garbett. I'm then happy to take in Assembly Member Desai and then Lord Bailey. Okay, so Assembly Member Best.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm just still trying to wrap my head around why money from a potential Labour government would make recruitment easier than money from the Conservative government that you had to hand back. That doesn't seem to quite tally, but as long as you've got a plan into your head as to why that's different. If this committee reconfirm you as Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, what would you do differently?
One of the things that I've spent the election period thinking about is, well, what would, how do I ensure that we understand what difference we have made and what difference we can make. So I've also been discussing that with officers around, what we have set out to do and have we achieved it and what else we should be doing. One of the things I really want to make sure that we do, and I do from MOPAC, is that we are much clearer and open around how we engage with communities, but also how we, and it's one of the things that I really want to do differently, is that I think one of the challenges for someone in a role like me is not to get sucked into only to being very internally focused. And one of the things I want to do really differently is to make sure that I am much more outward facing, understanding how the services, and listening how the service, not just Metropolitan Police, but the services that we commission, how they are impacting, what difference they are making, and how they can be improved. And I've been speaking to MOPAC officers about that, about how do we make sure that MOPAC is more engaging with communities and more understanding and hears the voices of Londoners.
And I think that's an important point, but something I'm concerned that you didn't specifically allude to there is listening to police officers, because police officers are demoralised. Their moral is on the ground. I spoke to an officer who moved from Kent Constabulary to the Met and said recently that policing in the Met is like policing with your hand tied behind your back and you've got no fingers on the other one. That's somebody that was happy in Kent Police, came to the Met and has found that it's a completely different way of working. So I hope that what you are going to include is also listening to officers, listening to them when they say that they want you to champion for them to have tasers, listening when you say that they want you to lobby to make sure they have knife ones for stop and search. This is the kind of thing that I think the Deputy Mayor for Police and Crime has to be on the front line, not only listening to the communities police serve, but listening to officers, listening to what they need and hearing how concerned they are and how their confidence as well. Their confidence is in the barrel at the moment.
I've always listened to police officers. I make sure that I try to make sure that every week I go on a frontline visit. I've not always been successful at doing that because of diary pressures, and that is incredibly important for me to be able to understand and listen to police officers. I was out with police officers yesterday in Covent Garden to talk to them about robbery and the challenges they are facing. I always have done that and have been very clear about that as being part of my role. So maybe that's why I didn't. Your question was about Your question was around what I'd do differently. Of course, listening to officers is incredibly important. I don't disagree with you. There is an issue around. I hear it from officers around their confidence. We've talked about that earlier around how they feel about policing London. These aren't issues that are solely within my ability to solve. We've talked about pay. Police officers' morale is very much affected, and the Federation is very clear about this, aren't they? Very much affected about their pay, because if they are struggling and worried about how they'll pay the bills, how they will, and how they'll pay the mortgage, that's going to affect morale. And I am very clear that we have got to make sure improving trust and confidence with, it isn't an either or for me about trust and confidence of communities or trust and confidence of officers. If you improve the trust and confidence of communities in the Metropolitan Police and improve the performance, I think that will have not just a knock-on effect, hand in hand, that will support and help police officers to do the job that they're trying to do to police London, because they will be able to engage with and they will have the support of communities.
But do you recognise that the way in which police officers feel demoralised comes from the political leadership they feel they aren't getting the support from? It goes further than pay, because some officers have worked in constabularies across the country and are identifying an issue with the way in which the Met works, and they're demoralised with that and the support they receive. Is that something you recognise and that you see that needs to be addressed over the next 4 years?
So I think that there's a complex issues around how police officers feel and staff feel, and I do talk to them about this. It isn't just about, you're right, it is not just about pay, it's a large amount about pay. Baroness Casey's review was a really difficult review, and it must have been very, very difficult for officers doing a really difficult and tough job to read what she was saying. It was, it is a reflection of what was going on in the Met, but that was very difficult. But when you talk about officers being worried about what politicians say about them, I'm afraid that isn't myself or the Mayor of London that I think they are worried about. The politicians who are attacking and not supporting the police at the moment in the government, they take clips that go viral and they really, they bear down on the Met. That has an impact on officers, and it has an impact on their confidence to use their powers as well.
I think to assuage the Mayor of any responsibility of that, there's a lot of officers that would tell you differently. But I think I want to come on to that. So within the pay, and I completely agree, we would all like to see, much like with other public servants, police getting more money for the job they do. But the Met should be one of the best breeding grounds to have a good career, and there is a budget there in which we can progress people, accelerate people, and get them into higher ranking positions. But at the moment, we're top heavy, not only in the Met, where you've got £35 million on high ranking staff just gone, £200,000 on a director of comms. We've got a director of service delivery, fair enough, for 200,000, and then solution delivery for £200,000. Then compare that with the top-heavy MOPAC as well, where in 2016 you started off with 113 members of staff on 7.8 million a year, and now we have 205 members of staff costing £17.5 million. So it's more than doubled. Do you see there's a problem with this top-heavy approach, where the top-heavy approach clearly is not breeding the results? Of course we should pay for top talent, but we're not seeing that translate into results for the Met. So will you, in the next 4 years, try to address this top-heavy approach to both the Met and MOPAC and make sure that there's more opportunities for on-the-ground officers to accelerate their careers?
You've put a number of issues into that question, because there's top-heavy. Does the Met have too many high-ranking officers? There's issues around
staff, not officers.
Staff. Oh, okay, sorry. Does it have too many high-ranking staff? You've put, does MOPAC have too many staff? Full stop.
High-ranking staff. High-pay staff.
But those figures that you use aren't around just the high pay, are they? Those figures of 100 to 200, that's not about high-paid staff. That's about the increase in staff in MOPAC, I think. And in terms of MOPAC, yes, there has been an increase in staff. Absolutely, there's been an increase in responsibilities. We've taken on complaints, the complaint reviews, which is a new responsibility. So there's been an increase in staff in that. We've already talked about, and we all know that the violence reduction unit is new. That's an increase in staff. You want us to tackle, and rightly so, hold us to account on it, tackle violence. You can't do it without staff, and you can't do it without the staff that can deliver, can commission, and can make sure that it's working properly. In terms of the Metropolitan Police and the high-ranking staff, I think a complex organisation such as the Met needs to be able to attract the best talent. It can't always attract the best talent, because actually, even though those salaries sound very high, and they are good salaries and high salaries, they aren't as high as you can get in different sectors. So actually the Metropolitan Police has struggled, and still does struggle, to get the talent it needs in some of the sectors, because you can always get a higher salary elsewhere. I think one of the big issues around the Metropolitan Police is not so much is it too top-heavy with staff, is that it's too inexperienced at the police officer level, because it's had to stop and change and stop and start its recruitment. We know that actually a real problem and issue and challenge for the Met is the inexperience of its staff, inexperience of its officers. That's a really huge challenge. I don't think the challenge is at the higher levels, that it's too top heavy. In fact, Baroness Casey, one of the things she talked about, she didn't talk about whereabouts in the organisation they should go. She talked about the fact that the Metropolitan Police needed to bring in more expertise in order to be able to support it, and in order to be able to support it in its change and reform.
Yeah, I think, and that's what I'm talking about, is in giving more career opportunities to those that are wanting to progress, and instead of being too top heavy. But I'm disappointed that you don't recognise that as an issue. But obviously that's for the next 4 years. But that'll be something we disagree on.
Thank you. Can I point out to colleagues, we're running out of time. I've got Zoe, most of your questions have been asked. Do you still want to carry on and ask that question or a different one?
I can ask it in a short way.
And if you could answer it in a short way, I'd be grateful.
So this is just about taking a public health approach and working with wider partners and colleagues. But just within the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime role is to set the budget and strategic priorities for the Metropolitan Police, and I wondered how you'll be prioritising prevention and the public health approach.
The budget setting process is the annual process we go through, and one of the things that I always ask of the Met is to be able to show me how the priorities that we set out in the Police and Crime Plan are being delivered through the budget, and now it is also how the priorities in the new Met for London is going to be delivered through the budget. That's a process that we have already kicking off, because it's challenging in the next year. I mean, one of the issues we've got is a massive budget challenge, but in terms of the public health and prevention part of the work, I think the the work of the Met around prevention is very much around its engagement, it's around public protection and making sure that that is there. So the budget, for example, in the number of officers that can be transferred into those areas, the budget needs to be able to follow that. One of the things that we're doing and working with the Met, and this has been led by the Met, I shouldn't take credit for it, is really making sure that where those budgets are, they really are realistic. They actually show the number of officers that are in those areas, and it's not a sort of theoretical budget, and making sure that, so that's important because it means that the oversight can happen and the accountability can happen because you're trying to hold them to account to a realistic budget. I think in terms of what I am looking for is for example, the Violence Against Women and Girls Action Plan, making sure that there is a budget and there's proper priority and focus given to prevention. Is a spectrum. There's obviously the work in schools with schools officers, but then there's the work of actually making prevention is also about changing the behaviour of perpetrators. So the Violence Against Women and Girls Action Plan, I want to see the budget and the focus and the priority around work with perpetrators. It's not just the Met that do that, but they are part of that. Tackling violence, integrated offender management that MOPAC has done a lot of work on. The Metropolitan Police need to be able to resource that as well.
Thank you. And just because you brought schools officers up, it's something that I'm really passionate about. And obviously there's some great work in Hackney where they're looking at using those officers back into the neighbourhood teams. So, yeah, just a plea to also listen to the young people about what they think about schools officers. And that's an opportunity to kind of move some budget around there. Thank you.
Thank you. My quick one is scrutiny requires that the Commissioner, it's the view of this whole committee, the London board now takes up his time, which is why he doesn't attend this committee so much, which we're all quite vexed about. Do you think that it's appropriate that an unelected board takes the time of our Commissioner and not this elected committee?
I think we've got to be clear that we want the Commissioner to be held accountable, and of course there's a role for this committee to be, the role of this committee is important in that. I think if you look at the figures, the Commissioner has only, I think it's only one, was it last year? There was only one less appearance in front of this committee than previous years. I think it was 3 instead of 4. I'd have to double check that. The Commissioner is one way of holding the Metropolitan Police to account. You have your topical committee meetings as well, where other assistant commissioners and commanders come to. There's got to be a balance between the London Policing Board and this committee, and I know that those discussions are ongoing.
But do you think it's appropriate that a board selected by the Mayor to scrutinise the work of the Mayor or his deputy should take the time of our top police officer and not this elected board that is here specifically to scrutinise the Commissioner? Do you think that that is appropriate? It's a yes or a no.
I think the London Policing Board is doing a very important job in scrutinising, challenging and holding the Metropolitan Police to account. The expertise and the experience on that board is going to be an incredible use and incredible help in terms of not just actually scrutinising and challenging, but supporting the Metropolitan Police to improve the progress and speed of reform. Of course, police and crime, I hesitate to say this, so apologies. Police and Crime Committees to hold me to account, isn't it? And it is important that the Metropolitan Police are here as well, and they have been attending. But I actually think, and I think I said this a couple of committees ago, I actually think a focus on MOPAC is good, and it's careful what we wish for from me, isn't it? Actually, so putting myself up for more questions. But, that is the role of the Police and Crime Committee, to hold MOPAC to account. And it is important that the Metropolitan Police are here in attendance. Whether it always has to be the Commissioner is something that is ongoing discussion.
It's something that this committee specifically would like, and is not best pleased that the Commissioner takes his time going to see an unelected board that really has been hand-chosen by the Mayor. But we're running out of time, so I'm going to the extra questions now. Firstly, Assemblymember Desai.
Thank you, Chair. Deputy Mayor, it is accepted by all the political parties here that the Met has not been fairly treated by the government when it comes to NIC, the National and International Capital City Grant, the grant that helps Met to do work that has a national and international dimension to it. It is estimated that the government has underfunded the Met by up to £240 million. As this is a job interview, so my question is, what will you do to compel the government to adequately fund the Met to meet the needs of a police service protecting our capital?
I think...
Sorry, if you could be as brief as possible, just because of the time.
I will continue, and the Mayor will continue to lobby to ensure that London is fully funded for its NIC, for the International Capital Cities Grant. You can see through the protests since the awful attacks on October the 7th, what a difference it makes to London, because it's the capital city. You know, the regular protests, of course, the freedom of speech is very, very important, but it does have an impact, so we will continue to lobby around that.
And you've been lobbying consistently for the last few years.
We have lobbied, as has the Police and Crime Committee, I believe. We've had support from yourselves on that, which
and
is
the
really
Assembly.
important.
So,
and the Assembly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to try and keep away from politics, you'll be pleased to know. What work will you be doing in MOPAC around fraud? Fraud is how most Londoners experience crime, so arguably it should be right up there on your list. What additional support can you be giving to Londoners around fraud? Sorry, particularly young people who are being defrauded across the internet, you know, people put money in their bank accounts, etc. But just fraud, what are we going to do more about fraud?
Fraud is one of those areas that it needs development, I'll be honest, within what we can do and what we are doing. And it's about capacity, but it's also about where can we make a difference, because, you know, the fraud is not, you know, often victims of fraud are London-based, but the offenders may not even be in the country. So, but you raise a couple of different things, don't you, about bank accounts and young people. That's about criminal exploitation, isn't it? And vulnerability. We are working, and I work with, you know, the Violence Reduction Unit around protective measures around that, so the young people, because that's a different matter, in my mind, different matter. But in terms of fraud, it's funding the victims, making sure the victim services are appropriate, and we do fund the victims, you know, our victim services are for victims of fraud as well. But we need to develop that, and we'll be thinking about that. It's one of the things we need to think about in the development of the next police and crime plan, around what can we do around protective measures and prevention for fraud. A lot of it's about education, isn't it? It's about people understanding how vulnerable they are online. You know, I always think about, you'd never leave your front door open, but online we often leave, you know, basically our digital front door open, and how we can protect people.
Okay, is there a role for schools officers, maybe an education piece? I don't need an answer, I just put it out there.
I'm sure there is.
Chair, back to you.
Thank you. And the last question from Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you. Just looking back over the last 8 years and some of these meetings, in 2021 you committed to providing the estate strategy. We have not seen that. You committed to improving trust and confidence at one of these meetings. Trust and confidence has gone down. We've got failing detection rates, we've got rising crime rates, and at the Casey review there was a direct criticism of MOPAC for failing to hold the Met to account properly and to scrutinise them properly. So given that you've just said that the role of this committee is to hold you to account, would you be happy with the recommendation, should you be successful in getting this position, to come back to a formal meeting of this committee in 2 years' time, where we can review formally your performance over the last 2 years?
That's a matter for the committee, because when you ask me to come, I have always come, except for in very extreme circumstances where, you know, so that's a matter for the committee, but I actually come every month to the committee.
No, but as a formal review in 2 years' time.
I'm happy for you to
I'll take that as a yes. Thank you.
Okay, great. So can I thank Sophie Linden for attending today's meeting. You're welcome, Sophie, to leave or observe the rest of the discussion from the public gallery. If you don't want to stay with us, I can't believe it. Anyway, thank you very much. That's fine, thank you. So, colleagues, the committee is now required to make a decision on its recommendation to the Mayor as to whether or not the nominee should be appointed to the office of Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime. So, as you know, we can either agree to recommend that the Mayor should proceed with the appointment, or it could be agreed not to object to the appointment of Sophie Linden. Sorry, did you? No, sorry. As Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, but write to the Mayor to provide comments regarding the proposed appointment. Or we could resolve to veto the proposed appointment of Sophie Linden as Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime. I mean, does the committee think that they are happy to agree the recommendation completely? Assembly Member Best.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to propose option 2 of not objecting to the appointment of Sophie Linden, but with comments from this committee. I have a couple myself, and I think perhaps from the discussion today, others may have comments as well.
What does Labour think of this?
Yeah.
Just
comments, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, of course. I mean, does the whole committee agree wholeheartedly it should just go through, or not?
Yes.
No.
Sorry.
No.
No, I mean with comments.
No. No. Okay, so option 1 is can't go through because it's not fully agreed that she should just be put in place. It's the whole committee happy to say, I mean, obviously, let's put it this way, if Labour are going ahead with this and want her to be reappointed, there's nothing the rest of us can do in any event. Otherwise, perhaps it would be different. So in that case, are we all happy to agree not to object, and then we can agree some things that have got to go to the Mayor via comments? Are we all happy with that position?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Chair, just
Sure.
if enough of us objected, because there's 4.
No, you put your microphone on. I think we're still on air.
I'm not suggesting we do, but there's 4 of them, isn't there? 5 of us.
Two-thirds.
Yeah,
Oh, 2/3.
Okay.
We need 6.
I'm just checking.
I had checked.
Stickler for the rules.
Lord Bailey, I had checked.
Lyndon B. Johnson's iron rule of politics learn to count.
Yeah. Okay. So can I have suggestions on comments that should go back to the Mayor? Assembly Member Garrett. Robertson. Sorry, Robertson. Garrett, I'll get used to this in a minute. I will. I promise.
Thank you, Chair. I do think that we should be considering, whether the committee should consider whether we do want the Deputy Mayor to come back for a formal review of this appointment in 2 years' time. I appreciate that we won't be able to revisit the decision which has been made. However, we have found time and time again that the Deputy Mayor has given assurances in these hearings which have not been met. And I think a 2-year formal meeting of this committee to allow us to question her specifically on the commitments made by the Mayor in his manifesto and then in this hearing should be something which she should be willing to do and welcome it.
Yeah. What's
I have a form of words if that would help.
Oh gosh, yes. Well,
we need a formal words, but
I think we do.
Right. A 2 years. A 2-year review is quite reasonable. But to remember, we cannot do. It's not going to be able to have any formal standing in overturning it. It's what we do afterwards. It's in principle issue, and it will be straightforward on a majority vote.
Yep.
Yep. So, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what the formal word is.
I can give you the formal word.
As long as it doesn't imply anything more than what it is.
Given concerns from Londoners regarding the loss in trust and confidence in both the Met and MOPAC, a formal review of the performance of the Deputy Mayor shall be held after 2 years of confirmation of post. This would enable the committee to offer a mid-term evaluation to ensure that key strategic targets are being met and that the assurances given in the confirmatory hearing have been achieved.
The language is not, I think, appropriate, but the principle of what you want to do is appropriate. I'd be quite happy to support that because I think that's an issue about accountability. And I would say this and put on record, Sophie Linden has attended on a regular basis when we've had Metropolitan senior officers walk away from us in terms of the police committee, and she stood by this committee and has spoken up for us. So in that sense, it's there. We might not like some of the exchanges we have, or even indeed with Mopac. I've been critical of Mopac in the past, but nevertheless, they have been here and increased in the last part of the administration. There was a better attendance from Mopac officers. We still have a problem with certain officers of how they respond to us, but that has been a much better response. So I'm all for that, but I don't particularly like some of the wording around that. But the principle of bringing someone back 2 years to review, take stock, where are you going, what have you achieved, what you said to us, and then what's happened, I think is fair and reasonable.
Yep. Good. Are we all is the committee agreed on that? Good. We'll find. Are we allowed to find words afterwards? If it's, can it be delegated to me to agree with?
But it'd be helpful if you could summarise the.
Okay. If you can find some words that will summarise. I've seen Assembly Member Best, and then Assembly Member Ahmed, and then Assembly Member Gabb.
Thanks. Just on that, I don't have any issues, but I think a little bit to what Assemblymember Deval was saying. This is our formal opportunity, and we will do a Q&A with Sophie throughout the 4 years. So it will be limited in the extra kind of value it brings, but I understand what you're trying to do at the same time, so I don't object. So my two comments that I wanted to make, based on what I think may be agreeable with the committee, is firstly a point on the Deputy Mayor upholding the important scrutiny advocacy of this body and making sure that she advocates for us to have the most senior officers attend. I think I know Sophie can't drag the Commissioner by his hand, but if she could at least agree to be, we could comment on her needing to be an advocate for that to happen. And the second point I would like to raise is one about recruitment. And look, without getting into a ding-dong about it, I think this is a serious issue that we have in the Met. We have committed to hiring more police officers, and I think that the Deputy Mayor needs to reassure us and comment on how we will make sure that this time round we do recruit those officers.
Okay.
Can we just add to that? I think what we should try to do...
Can you put your microphone on? We're still on.
Chair, sorry, I'm getting used to it, coming back. Look, it would be good if we added and said that we are going to make a special... for this year or even subsequent years, but a special impact about looking at that recruitment issue and monitoring it. But we do an ask on the rest of it. But we also acknowledge that she has publicly, in the past, said that she believes they should come and they should be there. And it's in the interest of the police to be present before this committee as well, not pick and choose. And I think your previous chair of the committee had got to a position, I think, where there was a conversation. We need to pick that up again, Chair, if we can, to see if we can move it further forward and get some bit more of a commitment from the Metropolitan Police Service, which I think would both be welcomed by Mopac and Sophie, but also by us, that we actually see something hard and fast. But I'm up for about special measures on recruitment. I will say this, one of the first members to start pointing out, both at Assembly meetings, there was a problem in recruitment. And we needed to wake up and see what the plans were. The Metropolitan Police were in denial of it. On the ground, it wasn't.
Okay.
I raised that, and I subsequently raised it here.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Assembly Member Ahmed.
Sorry, there was the third thing. The first thing you raised, sorry, around that was recruitment, and there was another issue that you raised.
It's just about that you already talked about the attendance of senior of staff to this body.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. Assembly Member Ahmed.
Yeah, it's just the wording, and I know you're going to sort it out, but bearing in mind what Assemblymember Deval said about how much power we actually have to actually enforce somebody to stand up. I mean, just using the word invitation, being invited to will be invited to attend in 2 years' time. I think doesn't make us look silly if she doesn't come. I'm sure she would.
I think it would make her look silly with respect, but we'll be mindful of the language. Absolutely.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you. It's just to echo what Assemblymember Best was saying about the attendance of the Commissioner. What I did find slightly disturbing was the idea that the London Police Board has got some form of primacy. We are the elected representatives of Londoners on this committee, and therefore it would be useful to have that recognised by the Deputy Mayor for Policing. The idea that, well, the Commissioner goes there so he doesn't need to come here is not acceptable.
I could not agree with that more. Lord Bailey?
Just to back up Assemblymember Ahmed's point, the one thing I want to put on record, Sophie has been very good at attending, so I don't think we need to demand her presence. We should ask her. I'm pretty sure she'll come back. But as a sign of respect, because she's never once tried to dodge us, really.
No, she hasn't. In fairness, Assemblymember, gone.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add another point to the recommendation, I did like what I heard about some of the community's work. I would really like that to take precedence in setting the priorities of the work. Just if we could really say that, you know, some of what we heard around working with communities was strong, but that needs to really take priority in setting the strategy. Thanks.
Okay, we'll find some words around that. One thing that didn't come up today, and I do apologise, is the estate strategy. Now, that has been going on for years, and we haven't had that through.
In passing.
And, I think we want to know exactly when this is coming out. I think we can all agree on that, because those of us that have been on this committee forever have been asking for it forever. So if that could go. Now, how are we with this wording? If I agree with it, with group leads, will that be sufficient?
Yes, so it may be helpful.
Sorry, is it another one?
Just on that particular point, Chair, so I think quite simply we just say that we will hold a mid-term review of performance against the targets that have been, or, you know, or just to say we will be holding a mid-term review. That's all I think we need to say at this stage, because we know that she will turn up. She said so already that she's happy to turn up, and we've talked about what sort of things that's going to cover. So, you know, 4 or 5 words I think would suffice on that.
On that, Will, but on the estate strategy, we need that straight away.
Just to back, if we put in what we want to have a review about, then the wording will become much more difficult.
No, it won't be. These are separate issues.
I accept your point, but you then said about the estate strategy.
No, that's a separate one. That's a separate. Don't worry, that is a completely, because we're all in absolute agreement on the estate strategy. Are we allowed to do this?
I think so. Would it be helpful for me to summarise the key points and then use the wording that's been used in today's meeting? Sorry, Chairman. I can summarise the key points I've written down, use the wording Assembly members have used in this meeting to write the formal recommendation to the Mayor, and group leads will receive an advance copy. But the wording will come from what has been used in today's meeting. So the first one is for the Deputy Mayor to attend a formal meeting within 2 years' time as a mid-term review. For the Deputy Mayor to advocate for senior Met Officer attendance at formal meetings of the committee. We'll pick up the point about the recruitment issues within the Met, the London Policing Board, the community's work to take precedence in priorities of MOPAC, and the estate strategy.
Yeah. Are we all happy with that?
Do we want to give a more concrete time limit for... Sorry. Do we wish to give a more concrete time limit for the publication of the estate strategy?
Good luck with that.
I know.
I think we need to know within a month when it is going to come out.
We need to know.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I agree.
I think we'll put a month on that. Assembly Member Best.
Sorry, I don't want to prolong the agony, but if we're talking about engagement with communities, I would also love to add in engagement with officers, improving that as well. So, if that's okay.
I think that's a very valid point. Right. Are we in agreement? Because I'm going to run now if we are. I'm ready with my gavel. Okay. Thank you, committee. I'm sure we'll go through those. If there's any problems, the leads, all of us leads will make it right. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you.
This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.